I'm Dawn.
And I'm Cole.
And Scottish Murders is a true crime podcast dedicated to people from or living in Scotland.
Just like anywhere else in the world, these murders can be truly horrific and shocking, and we want to shine more light upon them.
Join us every 2 weeks on Scottish Murders, where we'll bring you cases both solved and unsolved, giving you an insight into the other side of bonnie Scotland.
Find us wherever you stream your podcasts, as well as on social media.
Join us there. Bye.
Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Jo.
And this is Crime Divers.
Hello everybody, welcome to today's episode.
Hello.
And today is a very special day.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jo.
Happy birthday to me.
Hip hip, hey! Hip hip,
Hey!
right, done.
Thanks. Yes, I think in case anybody didn't gather that,
It's your birthday.
it's Jo's birthday today.
Yay! Woo! I should have got like the poppers or the woo.
Nah, that would have been annoying on a podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so as we say, if anybody actually remembers, I think we said a couple of months ago, because it's August is a special month because we have our birthdays and the pod's birthday is in August. We were going to maybe just do a couple of extra bonus episodes. So this is one of them, which is my birthday episode, and Laura will have a birthday bonus episode, but not on her birthday because Laura's birthday actually falls on a recording day anyway.
A release day.
A release day, sorry.
Yes.
I didn't mean recording day. A release day, so I'll give you an extra one.
Oh, did I get an
Like,
extra special one?
Yeah, you get an extra special one in a couple of days.
You have to start saying happy birthday even if it's not my birthday.
No, but they'll still be, that doesn't make sense.
No,
What I just said.
Aye.
Because your birthday will be on just a normal episode release
Yes,
day.
yes. Not
On a bonus one, but we'll still give you a bonus episode, but I'll sing happy birthday on your birthday.
Alright, thanks.
Right?
Awesome.
Okay, so
So, where in the world are we?
we are in, where are we? America, South Carolina.
And what is the title?
Taunted by a Killer. Because basically the killer kept phoning the family
And Tottenham.
and taunting them. Yeah. So,
Shall we
well, let's dive in
dive in? Let's
for
dive
our
in.
special birthday episode.
Yay!
So Sharon Faye Smith, who was known as Shari, was born on the 25th of June 1967 in Columbia, Richland County, South Carolina. Her parents were Robert and Hilda. She had an older sister, Dawn, and a younger brother, Robert Jr. Her dad was a local pastor, and she was raised in a loving, close-knit Christian family. So on the 31st of May 1985, when Shari was 17, school had finished up for the summer. It had been her final year, and her graduation ceremony was set for the 2nd of June, so it was only a couple of days away.
Mm-hmm.
After that, Shari and a few friends were going to go on a cruise to celebrate the end of their high school years. So, exciting time for her. She was looking forward to basically starting the next chapter.
Fair enough.
So she'd been to a pool party, and she drove back. She drove back from the pool party, and she arrived back home at 3:38 p.m. And the reason why we know this is because her dad looked out the window and saw. Anyway,
Right.
so the Smith house had a driveway which was about 200 metres long, and the mailbox was at the end of it, so near to the road,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
So her dad, Robert, he was working from home that day, and he looked out the window and saw Shari stop at the end of the driveway to collect the mail. So she had to get out of her car, walk round to the mailbox to grab the mail, and then she would get back in her car and drive the rest of the way up. So he went back to what he was doing, but after about 5-10 minutes, he actually realised that Shari hadn't come into the house. So he looked out the window again, and her car was still parked beside the mailbox, but he couldn't see her.
Alright.
And he said that he knew immediately that something wasn't right, and he drove down there to take a look. And he was worrying because Shari was a diabetic, so
But she maybe had like a hypo.
maybe something, she might have kind of fallen out
Yeah.
if her blood sugar,
Yeah.
wasn't right or whatever. So When he got to the bottom of the driveway, he saw that Shari's car was still running and the driver's door was open, but she was nowhere to be seen. So they lived right next to a wooded area, so he sort of went in there and he was shouting for her and looking for her, but he couldn't find her.
Right.
So he was like, what the hell? I looked, you know,
I saw it a few minutes ago.
yeah, exactly. And in that few minutes, she had just completely disappeared. So Robert called the police. And the assistant sheriff of Lexington County came straight away, and Robert explained to him, you know, that Shari wasn't the type to sort of run off. She was like responsible, she was like well adjusted, she wasn't the sort of teenager to run away. And the sheriff questioned Robert about his relationship with Shari. They talked about her grades, what kind of kid she was, how she got on with the rest of the family. And he said, like, after talking to Robert, he could tell that they were like a really close, loving family. You know, because obviously, like, you have to sort of suspect people to start off with, don't you?
Sure. You just need to establish what the situation is and what the circumstance of family life and that might be.
Yeah. And as I said, like, he could tell that they were a close, loving family, and he said he just couldn't shake the feeling that something bad had happened to Shari. So the sheriff called for assistance, bypassing the 24-hour waiting period required before officially classifying someone as missing person. And while waiting for the other officers to arrive, the sheriff and Robert retraced Shari's steps. You know, obviously careful not to destroy any possible evidence. But they couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, so they just had to wait for like more equipment and expertise. So officers from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, which is a bit of a mouthful, so it's actually known as SLED.
Right.
So if I ever refer to it in the future, it will be SLED. SLED. So they arrived at the Smith's home. Investigators combed the scene looking for tyre tracks, footprints, fingerprints, but just nothing. So, you know, another one of somebody vanishing into thin air.
It's mental how, like, the timing of, like, our dad looking out the window, seeing her, and then it's almost like the perfect timing that whatever's happened to her has then happened after that, when he's not obviously looked out the window, and then the next minute, it's like almost like the perfect window of opportunity there.
I know, because, like, the person who done it isn't going to be known if somebody's watching them out of the window.
Yeah, so that's what I mean, like, it was just total by pure luck, by the sounds of it, that it wasn't a moment like when the dad was looking out the window and then he might have caught what was happening.
But he didn't, like, as I said, like, he saw her, turned away, I think he went back to his computer screen or whatever.
And then next time he looked, it means she wasn't there, so that was...
So for the abductor, that was perfect.
Yeah.
So knowing the next few hours were critical, the authorities assembled a task force.
Finally, a police force that understands the critical need of searching in the first few hours for a missing person.
Well, there you go. I mean, they bypassed the 24 hours and they started searching straight away. You gave me a fright there because you said it so loudly. I was like, oh. So they organised a massive search. So the possibility of an abduction, that's what prompted the swift response. So surrounding counties sent every officer available to help. Word of Shari's disappearance spread quickly through the close-knit community of Lexington, and hundreds of local residents offered to participate in the search, but still there was just no trace of her whatsoever. So even though there was no direct evidence that a federal crime had been committed, state investigators called in the FBI. They wanted the Bureau to unofficially advise in the search and to assist in the investigation. So I just bit my tongue. Ow.
Duh.
Special Agent John Wilmer from the FBI's Columbia office was dispatched to the Smith's house the next morning. So they were baffled. Like, Shari was just nowhere to be found. 2 long hot days of searching passed and there was just still no sign of her. On the 3rd of June, which was 3 days after Shari disappeared, at about 2:30am, the Smiths received a phone call. So Robert answered it, and a voice that he didn't recognise asked for his wife, Hilda. So she went on the phone, obviously, and the caller claimed to be Shari's kidnapper. He apologised for taking Shari and said that she would eventually be returned. He made it clear that this wasn't a ransom call. He told Hilda that she would receive a letter in the mail later that day, and then he promised he would call back, and he hung up. So a phone tap had been set up earlier because obviously they were expecting, the abductor to get in contact. But unfortunately the call wasn't long enough to get a trace. SLED officers who were at the Smiths' home, called Agent Vollmer, and he called the town's postmaster and asked them to open up the post office so that they could search for the letter. So after about half an hour of searching, they found a letter addressed to the Smiths. So they put it straight in the evidence bag and sent it to the Sled Forensics Lab for analysis. Inside the envelope, examiners found a 2-page letter written on yellow legal paper.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a title, and the title was Last Will and Testament.
Oh.
Yeah. And it started off with, I love you, Mummy, Daddy, Robert, Don and Richard and everyone else and all other friends and relatives. So obviously, you know, it was Shari's last will and testament. So later on it read, my thoughts will always be with you and in you, and at one bit it had in brackets, casket closed.
Well, she was asking for the casket to be closed.
Yeah.
Oh.
Another bit read, I'm sorry if I ever disappointed you in any way. I only wanted to make you proud of me because I've always been proud of my family. So, but you know, obviously he's made her.
Well, yeah.
He's made her write that.
Mm.
So with the help of the Smith family, investigators confirmed that the handwriting was Shari's. Lab examiners began analysing the letter, but like searching for prints, hairs, fibres, any other clues that would, but that would actually take weeks. So, but like while they hoped that the letter would provide leads, they were shocked at the letter's content, especially the bit that said casket closed because.
Yeah.
Why? What's he going to do to her?
Well, yeah.
She would need the casket closed, you know. And it's just the fact that she's written that as well, you know, like she's 17.
Yeah, that's horrific.
Yeah. So as the kidnapper had promised to call back, as well as having the phone tap, investigators set up a voice recorder so that they could have his voice on tape. So that same night, June the 3rd, the phone rang at 8 p.m. and it was the kidnapper. He spoke to Hilda. I actually noticed all the way through this, he kept, because later on, he actually speaks to her sister, Shari's sister as well, and I kind of noticing that it's always the women that he wants to speak to.
He wants to speak to the men, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll get to that. So he spoke to Hilda, and I actually heard bits from the actual recording. So the kidnapper said, "Did you receive the letter today?" And Hilda said, "Yes, I did." Kidnapper, "Oh, okay, so you know now that this is not a hoax call." Hilda, "Yes, I know that." Kidnapper, "Good. Listen real carefully. I've got to hurry. I know these calls are being traced. Shari is now part of me. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Our souls are one now." And Hilda went, your souls are one now with Shari? And Kidnapper went, yep, and we're trying to work this out, so please do what we ask. Okay. So the call had been long enough for the trace to be successful. So the kidnapper had called from a phone booth about 20 miles away, but when the officers arrived, all they found was the receiver just hanging off the hook. It's like a film, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, isn't it?
Yeah. So he had got away, leaving nothing behind, not even fingerprints, nothing. So on the surface, the kidnapper's phone conversations revealed nothing about Shari's whereabouts. However, for the FBI, the phone calls offered a glimpse inside his mind. So they used the FBI profilers and the investigative support unit to figure out what was going on in this guy's head. So after scrutinising every detail of Shari's abduction, a 22-point profile of the suspect was generated. So he was thought to be a white male in his late 20s to early 30s with above average intelligence. Because it sounded as if the killer had... I just said killer and he was a doctor. But I suppose, we do know that he was going to kill her, so I'd spoiler alert, sorry. Oh,
just carry on.
I just spoiled it.
Abductor.
Sorry, I'm laughing at myself, not the situation. So because it sounded as if the abductor had electronically,
For God's sake.
Electronically distorted his voice, he probably worked in electrical contracting. He would have a prior criminal record and probably lived locally. The tone and content of his phone calls indicated that he was an asocial, which I didn't know what that meant. Do you know what that means?
Asocial?
Yeah.
I've heard that, but I don't know.
Well, I had to look it up because, you know, I was a bit thick. And it just means that you, like, avoid social interaction. You're just... you know.
Yeah. I thought
Me.
yeah. Just that's a perfect description of you.
Yeah, obsessive, an asocial, obsessive compulsive. I'm not obsessive compulsive. I just don't like people. So that's what he was. So if the stress of everyday life became too great, he would break down. He would then feel compelled to compensate for his own inadequacies through violent actions. So that was the profile. So on Wednesday, the 5th of June, they received this. Oh, it's my birthday, that's my excuse. Total excitement. On Wednesday, the 5th of June, the Smiths received another call. This time he gave the family directions to where they would find Shari. After giving the directions, he said, "We will be waiting, God chose us."
So now he's like, we. Okay.
Investigators raced to the location, but unfortunately they found Shari's body. So, my spoiler alert wasn't too early on.
So she was dead.
Yeah, so
and
they
he killed her.
Yeah, he'd killed her. So she'd been laid in the woods of Saluda County, 17 miles away from her home. So her abductor, so I can say abductor this time,
I know.
her abductor was now wanted for first degree murder. Honestly, I worry about myself sometimes.
I worry about you all the time.
So as that past week had been 100 degrees every day, Shari's body was in an
advanced state of decomposition.
actually, no.
Oh.
It was an advanced state of decay.
Oh, right, sorry.
The medical examiner couldn't determine the exact cause and time of death because of the heat.
Mm-hmm.
So that Saturday, 1,000 people attended a funeral service at the town's First Baptist Church, and that evening, the Smiths received another phone call from the killer. Shari's aunt answered the phone, and the killer said that he wanted to speak to Mrs. Smith. The aunt said she wasn't available, and then he went, "I want to speak to Dawn," who's Shari's older sister.
Right.
And her aunt said, "Well, I'm sorry, like, she's not available either."
Mm-hmm.
And the phone still had the trace on it, which, we know that the killer knew that the phone had a trace on it.
Mm-hmm.
So he threatened to hang up if Dawn wasn't put on the phone. So Dawn took the phone and again heard the actual recording.
Mm-hmm.
So Dawn came on the phone and said, hello, and the killer went, this thing got out of hand, and all I wanted to do was make love to Dawn. I'd been watching her for a couple of, and Dawn interrupted, "To who?"
Mm-hmm.
And the killer said, "I'm sorry, to Shari." And I went, "Dawn, I hope you and your family forgive me for this." And Dawn said, "When you killed Shari, was she at peace? Like, she wasn't afraid or anything?" And the killer said, "She was at peace. She knew that God was with her and she was going to become an angel."
Mm-hmm.
So overwhelmed with grief, Shari's mum, Hilda, insisted on talking to the killer. So she took the phone and said, "Did you tell her that you were going to kill her?"
Mm-hmm.
And the killer said, "Yeah, I did. And I gave her the choice and she picked suffocation."
Oh. I don't want to know what the other choice was.
No, I don't know. I just know that apparently, I mean, we don't know if that's right, but he said that he gave her the choice and she picked suffocation.
Right.
So it didn't escape investigators' attention that the killer had mistakenly used Dawn's name, which I realised that you picked up on as well because you went, "To who?"
Yeah.
Did you?
No, you did.
Oh. You made a funny face then.
I made a funny face, but you beat me to it.
Okay.
Seriously. Yeah, I'm kind of wondering why. Is there a reason why? Did we find out why?
No. So, yeah, so they braced themselves for the possibility that the killer might go for Dawn next.
Right.
But he didn't, and he had other plans. On Friday the 14th of June, so that was just 2 weeks after Shari's abduction, a man grabbed a little girl called Deborah May Helmet from her front yard in Richland County as she played with her brother. She was just 9 years old.
Oh.
A neighbour heard a child screaming, but unfortunately she wasn't fast enough. Like, she ran out the house and see what was happening, but the man, he drove away with Deborah in broad daylight. I mean, like, what a brass neck, eh? Like,
Totally.
so the police were called straight away and the neighbour could only give vague information. However, the general description of the suspect and his method seemed similar to the man the FBI wanted for Shari's murder. So Richland County Sheriffs immediately contacted the task force in nearby Lexington, and everyone was sure like this was the same guy.
Mm.
So after Deborah had been missing for a week, the kidnapper still hadn't called. So they decided to set a trap with the help of the local media. But the only thing was they were going to have to ask the Smiths to put their other daughter Dawn at risk to catch Shari's killer and hopefully find Deborah.
Right.
So they were going to have a memorial service for Shari. So the investigators asked local media to promote the service in the press so that because obviously they've got a profile on this guy and everyone, they kind of hoped that the attention to Shari would sort of rekindle the killer's fascination with Dawn.
Yeah.
So that would maybe like prompt another phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And Dawn agreed. She said, quote, "A lot of people thought we were twins. We looked a lot alike. And so they came up with this plan that if I were to answer the phone, maybe he would turn that fascination from Shari to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could keep him on the phone talking long enough about Shari, about himself, about anything to keep him on the phone, then they could trace the call and catch him." End quote. So on the day of the memorial service, plainclothes agents attended in the hope that the killer would visit the cemetery, but he didn't appear.
Mm-hmm.
But he did call, so they knew he was going to call. So he did call the Smith's house at just after midnight, and as predicted, he had turned his focus onto Dawn, and he made it clear that she was going to be the next victim. He said, "You know God wants you to be with Shari, it's just a matter of time." He then gave her directions to where they would find Deborah. So Dawn managed to keep him on the phone long enough for the call to be traced, and he was quite far away. But again, he left the phone booth just moments before investigators had managed to get there. And then there was other investigators. They followed the killer's directions and they found Deborah's body.
Oh no.
So really, I mean, their gamble didn't pay off because they didn't save Deborah.
No.
And Dawn was most likely going to be the killer's next target.
Yeah.
So,
So she was in danger.
Yeah. So meanwhile, the last will and testament of Shari had still been getting analysed. A machine was used called an ESDA. It stands for Electrostatic Detection Apparatus, and it can pick up images that are invisible to the naked eye. So an investigator found indented writing, so I'm assuming it's because the paper came from a writing pad. So there's obviously been writing on the paper above the last will and testament, and it's went through onto that. So so they saw what appeared to be a phone number and a name. So they were able to bring up the entire area code, the first three numbers of the prefix, the next two numbers, the third number they were unsure of, and then they had the fourth number, so they still sort of one digit missing. So the name on the paper was Joe, and the area code told them that the number was from Alabama. So to fill in the missing digit, the investigators called every combination of the phone number until they reached someone called Joe. So they finally made a match, and the number belonged to a man called Joe Shepherd. So investigators checked his phone records, and they found that he had received a call from an address in Lake Murray, which is just outside Lexington. So either of these addresses could belong to the killer, either this Joe's address or where that phone call came from. So local police visited the Alabama address and they met Joe Shepherd, but he didn't match the killer's profile. So even though he wasn't a suspect, he could still be an important link to the killer. So police had to find out, what the link was between him and the Lake Murray address. And he explained that was his parents' address and phone number. So they were Ellis and Sharon Shepherd. And their house was just 2 miles from where police had found the body of 9-year-old Deborah.
Right, okay.
So Ellis Shepherd, he worked as an electrician in home construction, and it was a profile that the FBI profile predicted. So as the officers knocked on their door, a car pulled into the driveway, which was the Shepherd. So when investigators saw the Shepherds, they immediately felt they had hit another dead end. So, because you're obviously thinking it was Ellis, weren't you? No. Besides Ellis's Shepherd's profession, nothing else seemed to fit the profile. So of course they obviously questioned them anyway, and the Shepherds told them that they had just recently returned from a 6-week holiday.
Right.
So the officers asked if they knew about Shari and Deborah's murders, and as they were questioning them, they could see that Sharon was becoming more and more concerned. The Shepherds were beginning to suspect their house sitter, Larry Jean Bell.
Oh.
So as they described him, elements of the profile fell into place. He was a white male in his 30s who lived with his parents, and he sometimes assisted Ellis at work, like in the home construction. So just days earlier, when the Shepherds had returned from their holiday, Bell had picked them up from the airport, and he talked on the way home from the airport. He talked a lot about the murders, and he told them that he was closely following the news of the murders and that he had saved the newspaper articles.
Right.
The investigators asked the Shepherds if they could see the inside of the house, suspecting that the killer had used a a weapon to force Shari into the car. They asked Ellis if he owned a gun, and Ellis showed them the drawer where he kept his revolver, but to his surprise, the gun was gone. So the couple were asked to accompany officers to the precinct as they wanted the Shepherds to listen to recordings of the killer's calls to the Smith family. So even though he had
electronically
altered his voice, to the Shepherds it was clear that the voice belonged to their house sitter, Larry Jean Bell. So the Shepherds told the police that they expected Bell to come to their house at 7:30 the next morning for work. So investigators staked out Bell's house, so they were just, there's no ways to get away, from them this time. So the following morning, Bell headed off to the Shepherds, and he was in his car. The following morning, Bell headed off to the Shepherds in his car, and he had an unmarked police car was following behind him. But obviously he didn't know that. And the officers radioed to another car waiting for him to cut off at the approaching intersection. So they were like, we're getting him. Yeah. So on the 26th of June, 1985, at 7:19 a.m, investigators sort of cut him off. So, got him out of his car, and he was arrested and taken to the precinct for questioning. So officers secured a search warrant for the Shepherd house, and in the room that Bell had been staying, they found Ellis Shepherd's gun under the mattress, and they found a blonde hair which matched to Shari Smith. So at the police station, Bell denied everything, but then he made a request to meet Dawn and Hilda Smith. See, I told you he's got a thing about the females. So they agreed to see him in the hope, because the police had been hoping to get a confession out of him because they didn't have much evidence. So they wanted a confession. So that's why they agreed. So Dawn said, quote, he began to mumble, because obviously they went to meet him, and he began to mumble and he began to speak about how he was sorry that this person sitting in that chair couldn't have been the one that had done this, but another Larry Bell could have been the one. Just, it really didn't make a lot of sense. So I remember sitting there, I remember looking at him, I remember listening to him, and I really just felt disgust that I knew this was the man. And he wasn't even man enough to say, I did it, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make excuses. But my mum said the most incredible thing to him. She said, I know you're the man that killed my daughter, and I can honestly say that I don't hate you. And he got teary, like, he sort of got a bit emotional. But unfortunately, he still didn't confess, so he wasn't that emotional.
And I was going to say, wasn't that bothered?
So after weeks of compiling evidence, investigators began to piece together the sequence of events of the 31st of May 1985. So Bell had noticed Shari after dropping his mother off at a doctor's appointment. She was, I don't know if she'd been at the doctor's or something like that, because she'd been driving back for a pool party, so she must have stopped off, and she was in this car park. He had noticed her, she started to drive away, and he followed her. So that's how it was so quick, because he was actually right behind her all the way home. So when she stopped at the mailbox, he jumped out of his car and he grabbed her, obviously pointing the gun at her. He took her to the Shepherd's house on Lake Murray, and he tied Shari to the bed. He then called friends he'd had dinner plans with friends, so he called friends to cancel dinner, and he told them that he wanted to stay in and watch a baseball game. That was his excuse. The evidence showed that Shari had been raped. Then he made her write the last will and testament. 12 hours after he abducted her, he covered her mouth with duct tape and suffocated her. It took less than an hour for the jury to find Bell guilty of first-degree murder. He had a separate trial for the murder of Deborah, and he was found guilty of her murder as well. So Larry Jean Bell was sentenced to death. And on the 4th of October 1996, he was put to death in South Carolina's electric chair.
Deservedly so.
And are you quite happy that I gave you a solved case?
Yes. Thanks for that.
We have been recording episodes, and I'm actually not even sure what, what's the word? What sequence? What order? Yeah. What order these episodes are going to be published on. But, so if you don't already know, Laura keeps moaning at me for giving her unsolved cases, so I promised her a solved one. So, is that solved enough for you?
Yeah, that is solved.
Because he actually got put to death.
Yes, he actually got the justice that was, deserved, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm not 100% convinced that I agree with the death penalty, because, even in the past we've done cases where somebody's been put to death and then maybe they weren't the killer. So
Yeah.
I'm not. I would prefer people to spend the rest of their life in jail.
Yeah.
And be actually punished rather than just be put to death because, you know, I don't see the death as a punishment for a start. And there's always that slight chance of what if they were innocent, you know.
This is very true.
Yeah, it can't be. Death is something that can't be undone.
No, it definitely cannot.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so there you go. All wrapped up and solved for you.
Thanks.
So thank you to everybody for listening. And I will put our contact details in the show notes.
And if you want to keep listening to us, don't forget to subscribe,
Rate.
review. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to my birthday episode.
Bye.
Bye.